Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to begin today by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, in what is now known as Toronto under Treaty 13. In supporting children and families, we commit to the ongoing work of decolonization by creating inclusive, just, and equitable spaces where all children can thrive. So welcome to our Beyond the Podcast webinar series, where we invite guests from our Bright Beginnings podcast to do a deeper dive on the topic. Today, we are honored to have Dr. Jean Clinton, who is a leading Canadian child psychiatrist, clinical professor at McMaster University's Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neuroscience. She has dedicated nearly 30 years to clinical practice and advocacy, focusing on early brain development, mental health, resilience, and the impact of relationships and connectedness on young minds. Her efforts extend beyond academia. Dr. Clinton is active in public education, speaking widely on parenting, brain science, and the essential role of early childhood educators. And she is the author of Love Builds Brains, highlighting the science of nurturing relationships. Through her work, Dr. Clinton champions a strength-based relational approach to supporting children, advocating for systemic change that ensures every child receives quality, equitable care and early learning supports. We are so pleased you can join us today, Dr. Clinton.
Well, thank you so much, Emma. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. I have thought long and hard about today, and so I hope that what I talk about resonates for people and gives them a question in their mind. So I'm just going to find my slides. Okay. All right. Oh, I remember now. I can't do presenter view. I can't do presenter view. I don't have my crutch. Right. So I'm going to talk for about 35 minutes, and then we're going to have time for questions. So get out your stickies because I'd love to have some questions. So I love this title that Emma's came up with, Strong Educators, Strong Foundations. Isn't that is just such an amazing picture in my mind, and it's so true. We need to value our workforce because when you do that, it fuels quality and improves outcome for children. So great title, Emma's, well done. I'm going to make it so. I always give thanks to the people in my life who have influenced me, and I choose Tom Porter, a Mohawk elder, who one time one of my mentors was ill, and I stepped in for him an Indigenous Early Years conference, and I heard Tom, and it changed my life. The idea that he shared, or the story that he shared, is that children are the sacred ones. They're the heart of the nation, and it's our job, it's our responsibility to raise them up well. So that hugely influenced me, and I use this picture of Tom because it so captures his essence so well. So many years ago, and you know, I've been a child psychiatrist for about close to 40 years now. I spent a lot of time in clinical practice, feeling that I was in the middle of a rushing river, trying to catch kids and families as they went by, and many more were flying by without me able to catch them. And so one of another mentor, Dr. Paul Steinauer said, Jean, what we need to be thinking about now is truly being upstream. Find out why kids are falling in the river in the very first place. And so that is something that I look to see. It's one of the reasons that I love the work that I'm doing just now with Michael Fullen on his team. And I love that the fact that early childhood learning and care is one of the most important upstream work that can be done. Why? Why is it so important? And the truth is, it's a determining influence on subsequent life chances and health. Learning, life chances. The brain is being built in these years. So the organization called the OECD thinks that childcare is important enough that they have a policy paper on it. Excuse me. Saying governments increasingly recognize the importance of investing in high quality early childhood education and care, given its tremendous potential benefits for children, families, societies, and economies. So they got it right. I wish that they had included in that opening statement that you need to have a workforce that is dedicated, that is well paid, and that quality is at the heart of all of it. Now, they did say this is what was taken, and the brilliant early years report comes out. But here this says spend more, but spend wisely. Children need you. They need high quality early education, and the economy needs working parents. It's not, finish the sentence, Jean. High quality ECEC meets the needs of both. You know, it's not, sometimes people say to me, and, particularly on radio, talk shows, if they had the kid, they should be looking after him themselves. It's still out there. It's still out there. And so my response is always if the children do well, if we have a foundation, then all of us do well. So I said in one meeting with a group of people, including government, do not open a single space if you can't ensure quality. So I said that's Dr. Jean Clinton to the ether, because what is happening now is a bit alarming. But what the early childhood educators of today are doing is so crucially important. Even if there's tons of new people coming in, the having a focused program of education and support is essential. That should be the quality. Working on the workforce should absolutely be the focus. So, what's the big deal? So just a quick couple of slides about it. And this is from Dr. Fraser Mustard, who was a leading figure in all this beginning with his early years report in 1999. And so what this is saying is that there are sensitive periods in the brain when the brain is just ready to receive that stimulus. So babies' brains are not fully formed when they're born. They become larger by the time that they're 3 or 4. And the making larger is because of all of the connections, the synapses that happen. It's not new neurons for the most part, but it's all of the action that experience is building the brain. So the brain is just kind of hanging out. Get the kind of that picture. Waiting. It's expecting stimulus to come in a moment that they're ready. And as you can see here, the area that has the greatest sensitive period is not in the school years. It is very early, 18 months, 2 years, certainly Back in the day, it was in the years before children went to school, but also now we have it in Ontario that the children are in kindergarten. So, why do we care about the brain? Well, it's not just produced by your genes. It's not just your genes that determine who you are. It is a lifetime of experience that sculpts that brain. So you see, these are a neuron. The blobby bit in the middle is the nucleus, and the things coming out are the axons, and the bright lights there are the synapses. So imagine in this little beauty's brain 1 million new synapses a second. So the brain's being built by early childhood educators. There is no other time in education that has the impact on brain development than the early years. The evidence is clear. So, I was once in a meeting and with a director of education, the board will remain unnamed, and the ministry. And I said, when we have early childhood educators getting the same salary as grade 12 physics, then Ontario will have done a great thing. So, how does it get built? This is Bruce Perry. The more a system is activated, being read to, being sung to, being soothed when upset, being yelled at, being frightened, both of those situations get built to reflect that pattern. That is the foundation for developmental memory, development, memory, and learning. And this is from Mary Helen Immordino Yang, an amazing neuroscientist in California that Michael Fullen and I are doing some work with now. And what she has said is our emotions and our relationships and our cultural experiences in the social world literally organize and shape the development of brain networks. That is what allows us to learn. So those experiences make such a difference to how the brain gets developed. But here's the thing. I've described, a lovely system where babies have positive, nurturing, safe environments. That they have a little stress in their life when they're not picked up immediately, when they can't get to sleep, when they want a toy. That is positive stress that takes time for the child to come to terms with it. But there's somebody helping them. In that situation, there's a mild elevation of the hormones that are released in the stress system. So a stress comes in, our amygdala, we've got two of them, one on the right, one on the left. This is the right that gets activated. When it gets activated, it sends out a signal through this HPA axis, and cortisol is released from the adrenals. That is only mildly elevated in positive stress. Intolerable stress is a greater degree of activation, but tolerable because it's buffered by caring adults. The brain recovers from it. The death of a loved one, here it says, is an example of that. Divorce, I'm not so sure I'd agree with, depending on the amicability in the end, and a natural disaster. But what we worry about and need to be thinking about from a policy perspective, from an ecosystem perspective, is toxic stress. When kids are living in dense poverty, when they are living in high conflict homes where neither of the parents are buffering them, they're hearing it all. Children who are maltreated, that is toxic stress. It's the adversity is strong, prolonged. It disrupts the basic brain architecture. And also, cortisol doesn't just affect the brain, it affects many organs, including our immune system. So, Mary, many more. I was going to remember the scientist who studied it, but it's gone. The looking at stress-related disease. One of my friends was a high up in the hospital here, and they were doing a big thing about how can we do better in the emergency room? What can we do about it? And I said, Dave, tell them to spend frickin' money on the early years because then you are building the foundation. You're creating the ecosystem where children's brains are built for flourishing. When the brain is stressed, when it's severe, it shuts down. Now, remember, there's positive stress. Not all stress is bad. And in fact, we need stress in order to develop resilience, but the right amount of stress. So the thinking part of the brain goes offline, the cortex, and we become stuck in the amygdala hijack, that brain state. So the brain, super important, and early childhood educators in programs that are high quality are literally building the brains of the children in their care when it's high quality. And so I'll talk about some economics here. What we know, there's nothing new, is that for every dollar spent in the early years, you get a massive return on investment. This graph also shows that the later you invest, the less return on investment. Now, that does not mean, well, don't invest in job training and adult education. Of course, do, but have policies that recognize how important earlier is. So, here is a wonderful report, a commentary that says high quality early child care and education, the gift that lasts a lifetime. In that, they outline what are the things that develop when children are in high quality childcare. Well, their cognitive abilities are improved, their social abilities are improved, their language is so very important. It is the gateway to cognition. Knowing the social rules, all of these things, the psychological safety, all of these things make a huge impact on that developing brain. And so here is one of the graphs. Again, I don't like talking about the money here, but Heckman, talking about James Heckman, a Nobel Prize winning economist, looked at the Perry Preschool Project, and what he saw was that the return on investment for every dollar, it will be somewhere between $7 to $12. There is nothing else that has return of investment like that. The work that early childhood educators and their supports makes a huge difference. Now that was Canadian, that was the what am I saying? That was American. I can't say American, but for these days, but it was American. But also here, the wonderful Gordon Cleveland and Michael Krasinski have looked at the benefits and costs of good childcare. That is a wonderful document. It gives the economic rationale for Canadian investment. So, why do we care about this so much? I stopped doing that. I don't know why it's skipping. All right. So, why is it so important to do this? What is it about the developing of the brain that's so important? Well, what we know is that infant and early childhood mental health is all about social and emotional development. High quality childcare is bringing in the talents, skills, and dispositions are made aware so that the children develop relationships with adults and their peers. That's called attachment through a system called attachment. They learn to express, manage, and work with their big emotions over time. This is what happens when they are then secure, when the adults in the child's life have been predictably there, one, to love them, to respond to them in a loving way. And when the child is distressed, they react, they respond, they go to that child. So when you've got those are the three big things are being developed. And they all happen in the context of the family and the community, the ecosystem. And the ecosystem I'm starting to think about is more rather than the circles, which we've made so many gains with that, with Bronfenbrenner's model. But maybe the ecosystem is more like a pond, and different things affect what happens in the pond. So when you have secure attachment at home, you can open your brain, as it were, to have more attachment-like connections with other adults. If you don't have a good, secure attachment at home, there is some research that says that children, infants, if they are in a childcare that goes with primary care, there is one person in the room that cares for that child. Other people do bits as well, but it's predominantly one primary care. When you focus on being safe, this is from Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. When you create the conditions that kids feel safe, they feel seen by you, they feel soothed, and they feel secure. You know, in my years as a child psychiatrist, I did a lot of work as a preschool psychiatrist, and I'd ask the families, tell me, how do you soothe your baby? What works for them? What do they need? And so many families who didn't know, who hadn't thought about, hadn't been given the guidance from allo mothers to know what soothes the baby. So in high quality childcare, you might put, after you do talk to the parents, what do they like? You stick it on their crib so the next person knows what to do. If this is all happening, kids have secure attachments. One of the big things is to think about when I connect with children, what am I doing? Am I correcting them? Am I directing them? And in a article on a Think Feel Act document from the previous government, I wrote a paper about the power of adult-child relationships and asked people to think about what is your C to D to C ratio? What is your correct, direct, and connect ratio? If you connect first, if you create a condition in the classroom where you have set it up that you're more likely to say yes than you are to say no, behavior problems are far less. So, in this system, who gains the most? So, clear as a bell, high quality childcare, and this can be home care, this can be center care. The research evidence is it's best that it's non-profit. But who gains the most? It's the children who are the most vulnerable. The children who toxic stress becomes a part of their life because of poverty, because of adult severe mental illness, maltreatment. They're the ones who gain the most. And you know, the kicker is they are the ones who get high quality childcare least. Now, what does it offer? What does early child learning and care offer children's development? I think we've covered that when you look at children who have been in an early childcare setting and compare to a child who has not, particularly children from disadvantage, the childcare gives them a boost. That boost is so important as you're starting school. That boost means that the child has not been completely bathed in a sea of negativity, as many of the families I see have seen over the years. So, how does it work? How do the changes happen? Not only the brain part, but it is relationship. Whose eyes light up for the child? Whose eyes light up? Like you see in this beautiful, beautiful picture, you can see the joy being transferred between them. That is the mechanism for brain changes. It's relationship. There is an energy being transmitted. Interoception. So, relationships, relationships, relationships. Early childhood educators, when they focus on a pedagogy of care, particularly, they're the active ingredients and of the environment's influence on healthy child development. That is what builds well-being. What gets in the way? That brain and stress again. So Here's what we know. Let's talk about what I learned from Armin Yelnizyan. Nan. She said at a conference that I attended, she showed us the birth rates and what's happening with it, and she said it is estimated in Canada that in 25 to 30 years, and that was about 4 years ago, the majority of the population will be too old, too sick, or too young to care for themselves. To me, that immediately makes me think that high quality childcare, affordable high quality childcare, available high quality childcare so that all children over two have the access because they're learning about empathy. They are the ones who are going to be looking after us. Not only that, but they are the ones who are going to build the matrices of our society, that weaving, that basket, that tefariki. They need to be well loved, well raised, and they need to have brains that are able to do various things that we can't prepare them for specific jobs because the majority, 70% estimate of jobs that our children will have do not yet exist, or if they do, will be completely transformed. That means our system needs to be one that is helping develop that cognitive ability, that executive function, ability to inhibit a stimuli, always being able to have your working memory going, and coming up with other strategies to make sure you get through that. That's working, that is executive function. And so it's crucial also that children have self-regulation. So I watched a little video clip, and thank you. I hope this is okay to use. I watched a little video clip of Armin through the Atkinson website. And what it said is that in order for our communities to thrive, we need a base, which is the natural, the resources around, but the next layer, which takes up more of the GDP, oh, it's just gone for me, the GDP than other big items is care. All of the people involved in the care technology need to be valued. What does it mean to care? Here is a quote. I won't be able to read it. There's a wonderful book called Illuminating Care by Carol. Oh, I can't see it. All right. We need to think about a pedagogy of care. Care is not just a soft skill. It is a building block for a strong humanity. A building block for a strong humanity. So, what's it like now? How are our early childhood educators doing? Are we finding ways to recruit and train them well? the ones who have come in fast? Do we have things in place to be able to educate them well through a mentoring, relational, facilitated manner? So, like Oliver here, we have to say to the federal government and the Ontario government, please, sir, I need more. And we need the right stuff. We need high quality learning. And in fact, it's really important. Okay, I hear you. It's really important that we think of professional learning not as a one of. You know, you go to a day and you like it, and then you go and you've forgotten it. But really, one that changes how you see things and you become as much a learner as you are a teacher. And then professional learning is happening every day. So I want to say a big thank you to my early childhood educator friends. I've been with early childhood educators for 38 years in one way or another. And this is my buddy, Laurie McGee. And she has taught me so much. We are very lucky there in Reggio. So, what I was saying is to enter into a style of teaching which is based on questioning what we're doing and why, on listening to children, on thinking about practice, how theory is translated into practice, and how practice informs theory. That is to enter into a way of working where professional development takes place day after day in the classroom. So, one of the things that's very important in this field, well, for all of education, is the necessity to look inside, to find your calm, know yourself, your biases, because who and how you are is as important as what you do. And then remember Loris Malaguzzi, there is nothing without joy. And I will finish there. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing now, Emma's.
Thank you so much, Jean. It's always such a pleasure to listen to you speak. I'm going to open the chat to questions, but I have a few already. Uh, you talk a lot about the importance of early childhood educators. In terms of policy, given this clear connection between stable, responsive relationships and child well-being, what message would you send to policymakers about investing in wages and working conditions?
The quick message or the long message? The quick message is frickin' something. You need to invest in the most important educators in our children's lives. You need to create a system, a way of working where they are valued, they are seen as a professional body, they are compensated well. That will bring people in. You know, right now, my friend Laurie says, you know, here we are. We say it's hard work. You never get time off, and you hardly ever get to the bathroom. But why don't you become an early childhood educator? We need to be changing that dialogue.
And what structural changes do you think are most urgent right now to retain qualified staff?
One, I think, is to work with the centers to become more of a team, to be able to think about the whole center, develop the values for the center, because then you can check if you've got a question, you can check against it. So, time. There needs to be time in an infrastructure. There needs to be high quality education materials, but not just stuffing the duck, not just one day and done, but through a mentorship model, a relational, reflective model where there are facilitated discussions, that there are dedicated people who are, they are the quality folks. And it's not with a checklist and accountability. It's about an understanding of quality as a process and that there are key components.
You answered, I think, the another question around I've just lost it here. Sorry. About what can center directors and system leaders do to change the culture. So I think you spoke a little bit about that working together. Um, in,
Can I just add one
yeah,
thing, Emma? So I've been greatly influenced, and I'm working with a fellow called Peter Senge, who wrote The Fifth Discipline, and he talks about compassionate leadership, compassionate system awareness and leadership. And I think that's worth Googling and learning more about for all center directors. Because not only are there tools like the ladder of inference and iceberg and other things about it, but there is a methodology that helps you be together as a team. You create a group that has energy.
absolutely. And I think we've lost a lot of that in this, an environment where we're kind of it's a crisis environment. So we've lost a lot of that working together. If you could redesign the early year system from ground up, what would be the one non-negotiable you'd build to ensure every child thrives?
One, okay, so you're talking to a shrink, right? So my non-negotiable would be that the educators are well looked after so that they can create safe, nurturing relationships with children. Safe, nurturing, predictable relationships with children.
Um, Another question here is around, you spoke around those relationship pieces, but what role do you see early childhood educators playing in promoting specifically around resilience in young children and equity? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Jean.
Yeah, I went on mute because my doorbell just rang. Could you repeat the question?
Yes, for sure. The question is, what role do you see early childhood educators play in addressing those systemic inequities in child development outcomes?
Mm, what a great way to be thinking. And when you have a high quality childcare that looks at the individual child and the whole child, then children are seen for who they are. So that's a huge important, an important part of that. The other is it's really necessary that there is a way for early childhood educators to have an educational opportunity, a professional development opportunity that looks at anti-racism, that looks at all of the biases that come, including for the LGBTQ2 plus community. Children learn about how you treat the other starting as early as 2.5 and 3. So high quality childcare, I keep saying high quality childcare, um, creates the conditions in the classroom where that is, you can't say, you can't play. That's an example.
Thank you. In your perspective, you talk about the early childhood educators and their knowledge and what they bring, and their importance and their value. Can you talk a little bit about, in terms of that foundational training, but the importance of professional development as well in all that you're talking about in terms of trauma-informed practice, in terms of the equity piece that you just discussed, the importance of PD, really.
Yeah, it's lifelong learning is a principle that I would hope becomes a value when centers have that discussion about what do we value? What do we stand for? I would hope that lifelong learning is one of those things. And that means that professional development is one where you deeply think about what's the best way for me to learn and change my practice. And it's not by, I hate to say it because it's how I work, it's not by one session and gone. It really is needing time, facilitators, reflective practice, so that the educators are thinking together about not just the issues in the childcare, but what's going well. Right now, I'm involved in a large program for early infant mental health, early years mental health. And what we're doing is I do my bit, and then my dear friend, Laurie, who's an RECE with 40 years, she gives the practice. She talks about how you learn what it looks like in practice. And so we do that. But then at a table, everybody talks, not your usual buddies, but mixed up, talk about their, when they hear the word attachment, what does it mean? When we were talking about emotions, which ones are easy for you and which ones are hard? So that it builds a reflective opportunity. That's how PD should be. But it should also be one that opens the door for communities of practice. So mentorship obviously is key.
We have a lot of regional governments here with us today. As I look at the list of participants, Ontario has 47 regional governments. What advice would you give for practical next steps to regions as they try to build a high quality early learning system or continue to build a high quality early learning system?
The first, so one, this is not necessarily just like some of the earlier questions. This is not necessarily where I spend my life thinking. I'm more at the developmental end. Um, but one of the things would absolutely be make sure as you're opening that it is a high quality center, that you have worked with the community to develop what are our values. As in Hamilton, we have that it's the best place to raise a child that came together from the community. So think about, make sure that there is opportunities for professional learning and development. That if so too, if you're in a position, as many are, where you have to hire non-trained people in the formal sense, it will be if that is a harsh, unfortunate reality because it should not be happening, but there is life right now. So the selection of those people should be one where you have to find, can they put themselves in the shoes of the children? Do they understand that? And then looking at what are the things that we can do to mentor these new people in a new world to help them do well.
And and unless there's any more questions from the audience, I'd like to ask one last question, Dr. Clinton. If you could leave the audience with one message about the long-term value of early learning in shaping our society, what would that be?
The one message truly is love builds brains.
And I love that.
Yeah, it's so true in early childhood, but also true throughout our life in adulthood. But love builds brains. That's what I would leave. That's what I did just leave with the early childhood educators.
We have a question from Rhonda. Did you want to open your mic? I just saw it in the chat here.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's okay. I can speak on that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Clinton, for your time and being able to share this with us. It's very valuable to us. I just had a question about your opinion on supporting and educating parents on these topics. We come from a company for sports education, and we deal with students from 16 months all the way up to, 6 to 9 years old. And we have, various uh, parent reactions, I'll call them, to our program and how we do things and how do we keep it age appropriate. So just wondering about your kind of opinion on that and how to deal with that for the more resistant of the groups.
Yeah. So, Rhonda, thank you so much for highlighting something that I did not include, but is essential. How does learning happen, or how does learning happen? Talks about the triangle of the child, the early childhood educator, and the parent as being competent and caring. So again, going back to what I said earlier, when you're developing your values as a center, parents need to be part of it. They need to have their say so that you become contextually literate. When you have a conflict, which I think you're alluding to, Rhonda, when there is a conflict with parents, I think the essential part of the interaction is for you to be open, have an open stance, and be non-defensive. And that you approach them with the way you approach the children in terms of wonder, and ask them when they say something, tell me more. Where might that come from? How can we work together? Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Clinton, for joining us today and for being a guest both on today's webinar, but also on our podcast series, Bright Beginnings. Your insights into the vital role of early childhood educators and the power of relationships are truly incredible and meaningful and thought-provoking. You're always passionate, and your deep commitment to children's well-being continues to be an inspiration in our work and all that we do. So thank you so very much for being with us here today. And thank you
Mm,
to everyone else for joining.
yeah, Amos, thank you so much. That was a very, very lovely thank you. It moved me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for being here and great questions.